Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Danilo Evangelista, and welcome to our Hurricane Outlook and discussion for Thursday, June 16th, 2022. Today, what we're looking at for the tropics, which is not a whole lot. There's quite a bit of things going on in the Eastern Pacific. We'll review that in a little bit, but meanwhile, in the Atlantic, we have Invest 93L, which is, as noted over the past few days, gone inland over Central America. Really, its circulation kind of collapsed because it did have if we do remember, it did have a pretty decent circulation a couple of days ago when it was in the Southern Caribbean, and people thought it might have developed, might have possibly had the chance to develop. It didn't develop it didn't explicitly develop, but it really looked like it had the chance to. But then it's gone over Central America, and now it's really just collapsed with its circulation, and now there's not really much left of a defined low level pressure with this. So as the latest 2 p.m. advisory, the National Hurricane Center has us at 10:10. Nothing much to really talk about when it comes to this forming. It's just going to be a very big area of rain, which that in itself cannot be it can't be the rain. It can't be ignored because we all know that even when it comes to tropical cyclones, the rain threat is the hugest threat. The storm surge, which is associated with water, is the hugest threat. It's not the winds. The winds are part of the picture when it comes to tropical cyclones, but the water and the rain, especially when you look at storms like Ida, it was not even a tropical system when it hit the Northeast, and it brought a lot of rain to New York and the surrounding metropolitan area. And then we look at storms like Mitch. The reason why we had a lot of deaths in Central America, over 10,000 deaths from Mitch of 1998, was because it stalled and produced lots of rain, which caused mudslides because of the terrain of Central America. And then we had Harvey, which produced over 60 inches of rain in portions of eastern Texas. And with that, and we saw damages with Harvey totaled up to just as much as Katrina, if not even more. And so we can't really deny the threat of 93L to be rain, even if it doesn't become a tropical system, which it likely won't at this point. It's still going to be a huge rainmaker for Central America, and it will still be something we need to watch very closely for sure. Over to the Eastern Pacific, as we look at the next few days, well, we have Hurricane Blas, 85 miles per hour, 980 millibars. Looked like it could have gotten pretty intense. At National Hurricane Center was thinking it would get up to 100 miles per hour, but Shear kind of tempered this, and we'll look at the satellite really quickly in just a short bit. Shear really took over this storm. It was displaced from its upper level anticyclone, which would have helped with its outflow, but the fact that it's displaced from that, it's getting sheared from it, and that's why we're not seeing this develop too much. It's moving west-northwest at 8 miles per hour, though, and it is moving away from the coast of Mexico. Then we have 93E, which is to the east of that, and it's much closer to the Central American coast, and this actually is having an impact on 93L, causing its steering to possibly just dive it right into Central America, unless it gets into the Bay of Campeche, where if it does get there, maybe it has a chance to develop, but other than that, 93L really is going to be impacted by 93E, which is to the southwest of that, on the other side of Central America in the Eastern Pacific, and that actually has a very defined low-level center. And the National Hurricane Center even mentions it has surface winds of near 35 miles per hour, and additional organization could result in a tropical depression, they noted, as soon as this afternoon. So this is really on the brink of becoming a tropical system. And we'll also look at the satellite to show you that really this might become a tropical system very soon, if it not already is one. But really quickly, just taking a look at the satellite imagery for Blas, you can see it has a pretty defined system, but you can see it's struggling to rotate the convection fully around its core, which is somewhere right in here, the center, the core of the storm. You can notice that its convection is kind of tapering off and remaining on the eastern side of the storm, and it's because of shear that's impacting the storm that it's not allowing convection to wrap along the western side of the storm, and because of that, it's been remaining its intensity at around 80 to 85 miles per hour for a while. And because of that, and it's getting into much higher shear and lower water temperatures, which is not far ahead of the storm, it's expected to start weakening too. And as noted by the National Hurricane Center, it's going to remain a hurricane for a little bit while longer, probably till around tomorrow evening. Then over the night, tomorrow night into Saturday morning, we'll start to see this weaken into a tropical storm. And then by Sunday, and into next week, even not Sunday, but into next week, the National Hurricane Center has this completely dissipating into a post-tropical, extratropical remnant low, as this gets towards the much cooler waters of the Pacific, which is not far behind, not far ahead of this, because the Pacific, especially given the fact it's in a La Nina, there aren't really that much in terms of widespread warm anomalies throughout the Pacific to really fuel storms, except if they're forming right close to Central America, like this is. And of course, this Hurricane Blas is not a threat to land, except if you factor in the rip currents, because all the models is having this going out to sea, and basically that's the end of that. 93E, if you could see here, the convection of this is not looking that well, but I should have pulled up the visible satellite imagery that there's a very defined low-level center in here, and then you can clearly see the low-level clouds twisting counterclockwise very nicely. Even though the convection is not there, there's a very defined low-level center with this, which is why the NHC is tagging this at possibly almost on the brink of becoming a tropical system. And then you can see here with the most of the model guidance, after it develops within the next 24 to 48 hours, kind of similar to what Blas did in its early stages. It's going to kind of meander around just south of the coast of Central America for a little bit before getting yeeted off, I guess. Yeeted off and turned off straight to the west, where we'll then likely also avoid land. But of course, as we all know, the main thing when it comes to these storms that we'll need to watch for is the impacts of rip currents, because those could still cause loss of life. They very much can, especially with those that are not careful when it comes to swimming along the beaches. They can take some people's lives, and they have had a historical presence of rip currents taking people's lives, from hurricanes that are well offshore but causing rip currents to the coast. That can be a threat too, and we cannot undermine that threat as well. But most of the models, the majority model consensus keeps 93E very weak. Very few models take this to a strong tropical storm at best. One or two take this to a hurricane. This one is a little weird, so I guess we could count that out, and really only one more trustable model has us taking it to a hurricane, while the other models just keep it around weak to tropical storm, weak to moderate tropical storm category. So I'm even keeping this out of depression entirely. And then finally 93L, not much going on, and we actually have the visible satellite here, so I could show you here 93E, and you can see why the National Hurricane Center is saying that this could become a depression as soon as this afternoon. You can see the low-level center real defined in 93E, and you can see it really turning in there. Very defined low-level cloud action in a anticyclonic motion, which really denotes that this is developing into a storm. 93L, though, on the other hand, not much going on with that, because the low-level center kind of did move off the coast of Central America. But as you can see on satellite, what's very clear is that there's barely anything left of it. There's barely much in terms of a low-level circulation left with 93L because of its interaction with Central America. And that's one of the things we needed to watch with this, of whether or not it would stay over Central America as opposed to interacting with it and it killing off its low-level center. But we do have some pretty decent convective activity associated with that. And then you do notice that to the east we have a very big extending tail of convection, probably some thunderstorm activity over Puerto Rico and the Dominican Republic, where we do see some convective activity. And besides that, very strong upper level winds in the eastern Caribbean. The western Caribbean, the upper level winds are weaker though, so maybe, you never know, that this tries to get going a little bit more very briefly before it gets towards the Yucatan. And then maybe if it gets into the Bay of Campeche decently, not barely, because it'll not develop that way, but if it gets to the Bay of Campeche decently enough, maybe it might get a chance to develop there. It just really depends, though, and it really depends how 93E impacts this, which you could clearly see on the visible satellite. That's what I wanted to show you before with 93E. You can clearly see it's very defined and basically on the brink of becoming a tropical system. And then you can see with the low-level vorticity, there is some vorticity, but it's definitely not as defined as it was when it was in the southern Caribbean. A lot of the low-level vorticity situated just off the northeast coast of Central America. Then you got 93E here, which has some pretty potent circulized, I guess. That's not really a word, but I guess it's the best way to explain it. Very potent vorticity associated with this, so agreeable that the National Hurricane Center that this could be a tropical depression, if not one already. Then you have the very tight vorticity that we look at when it comes to a tropical system. This is the classic that you want to see when it comes to a tropical system. Very circular vorticity that's very concentrated, and that of course it's because it's associated with the Hurricane Blas, which is of course going to move off to the west here and not impact Central America, which is good. And then after that, out along the eastern Atlantic, we do see very potent tropical wave, and I'm going to show you on one of these other satellites, not this one, but the other one, right by 93E. You could see there's, I guess the reason why we're not really seeing that much in the way of good convection with 93E as well. You could see it's being impacted by shear a little bit, which is why the convection, if we go back to 93E, it's looking a little but the circulation is there, which is why the NHC might classify it soon. And then over the Western Caribbean, maybe we'll have to see if 93L tries to get together a little bit more over the Western Caribbean, because there is quite a bit of low shear, some values in here up to as low as 10 to 5 knots, at least as of this latest map when it comes to the Western Caribbean. I do know that there's some sort of upper level anticyclone over the Western Caribbean, and of course, so we have to see what might happen. But of course, you could look out here in the Eastern Caribbean, a lot of strong upper level winds cutting across, and as in return, you could see that there are very strong wind values of wind shear in the Eastern Caribbean expected for this time of year. But looking out in the Eastern Atlantic, some pretty vorticity associated with the tropical wave, but that's not what I wanted to show you. What I'm really interested in is looking at these very strong waves coming off of Africa. My goodness, goddamn, basically. See that very strong, potent wave really associated, and I think this emphasizes a very big climate factor for this year, is a very, very potent African monsoon. And as I talked about before, that's a very big factor when it comes to hurricane seasons. And when we see this, it really does denote that the African monsoon is very strong this year, and that might mean that we really have the potential for activity to be favored in the Atlantic, because a strong monsoon means we get a lot of waves like this that are very potent, very strong, and of course, if the conditions are favorable in the Atlantic, them coming into the Atlantic as potent waves only gives them a better boost to become tropical systems in the Atlantic, and of course increase the chances for an above normal season. But of course, as we look right now over the actual Atlantic, a lot of these low level, these kind of ghost clouds, as I like to call them, over the low level Atlantic, kind of denoting a lot of Saharan air out towards the Atlantic, which is typical of June. So once this moves westward, this will really kind of die off and not become anything too much of interest, but very typical of June. We don't need to worry about that impacting the rest of the season, because that's just climatology for this time of year. But taking a look at the GFS, just going out in time, and you just basically see maybe 93L tries to get a little bit of its energy back when it's over the Caribbean, but you do see to the south here, 93E really does kind of push this into Central America, kind of burying it in there because of the general upper level kind of rotation that's associated, of course, with the Central American gyre, which is why we have both 93L and 93E. But then you obviously do see here 93L just kind of remains by Central America and doesn't do much, but then 93E does end up moving westward over time. But other than that, just taking a look at the Atlantic, there's not really that much going on. Very, very strong ridge of high pressure, which is also keeping 93L to the south of becoming anything really that much of tropical interest. Of course, it still is somewhat, but you do see here in general, by the time we get to 5 days, notice this real potent high pressure ridge over the Gulf Coast. This is going to help enhance the drought over the Gulf Coast, the excruciating heat that we're seeing there right now. And of course, we're going to help keep anything that does develop in the Caribbean, unless this ridge kind of weakens a little bit. And that's what's happening to 93L. Anything that develops in the Caribbean will be kept south and from impacting the Gulf Coast. Or if the ridge is potent enough, which it is right now, because of how potent and how dense of high pressure the air is, it's just going to keep everything even into Central America, and we won't see anything develop at all, which is basically what we're seeing and at least expecting with 93L right now. Then after that, GFS, as obvious already, tries to spin something else too, but we already know how that goes. Maybe we might actually see something try to develop, but nothing too much going on. Do note that there's a little bit of these potent tropical waves that do come off the coast of Africa. Look at that. Very potent wave, and I guess we could already go back to this wave. That's probably what the GFS shows, but in general, very strong waves that do come off the coast of Africa, and the models are showing that. And I did hear talk about some models hinting at some pretty potent waves moving off the coast of Africa closer towards the later part of the month. And around that time period, what will happen is going to Ben Noel. Nice transition, I guess, when it comes to these strong waves. Ben Noel does talk that the forecasts over Africa and the eastern Indian Ocean over the next several weeks are linked to the monsoonal IOD and NJO activity. He notes that this forecast for July looks similar to 2020 of all years, and we know how 2020's July was, and 2010. Basically the opposite of 2020. We remember 2020 had 5 named storms alone in July, which basically tied the record for the most amount of named storms to be ever recorded in July, only tied with 2005, but 2010 only saw Bonnie in July and another weak depression, I think. But other than that, there wasn't that much. But the general activity that we're looking at for the Atlantic is very strong MJO. If you see here, just very strong MJO over West Africa and also in the Eastern Indian Ocean. And as we all know, when it comes to that type of pattern, it's really important that we watch for this, because we all know that rising air over West Africa, like the models do show here, rising air, especially over West Africa, that would really help enhance the West African monsoon. And especially when you see that sinking air over the Pacific, that really denotes things will get much less favorable for the Pacific in the next 2 weeks. So a decrease in shear, a decrease in subsidence, and who knows, especially out here in the MDR, maybe once we see a decrease in shear from activity in the Eastern Pacific, maybe with how potent this signal really does look for the Atlantic, maybe we'll get maybe this year will be one of those years where we get an early developing system in the MDR in July or even late June, especially when it comes to the model indicating some pretty intense waves coming off the coast of Africa. You never know, and definitely could possibly happen. We've seen it happen multiple times before, especially in years like this that we're expecting it to be. You just never know, and we'll watch for sure exactly what happens. But other than that, not much going on across the Atlantic, and it does really seem like things will remain quiet, as they should be for this time of year. It's not every year we get a crazy early season. Not every year we get that, and we shouldn't be expecting that every year. But so far we had a named storm, and it does look like things will shape up for this hurricane season. And of course, as I mentioned, late June, maybe we'll have to watch for something off the coast of Africa. You never know. But other than that, a lot of things staying quiet in the Atlantic. Of course, going to watch 93L and 93 in the Pacific, as well as Hurricane Blas. But other than that, nothing much else to talk about. If you like what you saw today, I would appreciate it if you would have liked, comment what you think of this video, and also subscribe too, to really help the channel out and help grow, so we can of course bring the information of the tropics, which is my goal, to bring information of the tropics to people, to keep informed, especially when a hurricane is coming. That's my real big goal for this year, and I really do hope that you would be able to help me out on that goal by just simply subscribing. It's free on your end, and it's very efficient, I guess, and especially efficient when it comes to whenever you want to unsubscribe. Very easy to just easily click the unsubscribe button. But one more thing, if you subscribe, click the notification bell, because especially when it comes to getting information, as soon as it comes, the notifications on YouTube will notify you basically right on the point when I release a video. So you'll definitely want to keep that on, turn that on, get to get the notifications of whenever I post a video as soon as I post it. Alright, other than that, I'm gonna sign off, see what happens tomorrow, and of course we'll have tomorrow's discussion, of course, with everything else going on. Stay safe, peace, love, and kindness to all, and we'll talk again tomorrow. Bye.